The shuttle bay was silent in the way only fear could make it. 200 cadets stood in armored rows beneath the red glow of launch lights, their faces fixed on the massive holoscreen above. Across it rotated the image of Virex 9, a dark green world wrapped in storm bands and jagged oceans. Warning symbols circled the planet in bright crimson. Class 3 Deathworld. Cadet whispers spread like static. 7 days. One avian cadet muttered. With survival packs only, another said. That can't be legal. At the center of the formation, Cadet Ethan Cross folded his arms and stared at the hologram with open interest. Then he smiled. "Wait," he said, glancing around. "This is the final exam? I thought this was supposed to be hard." Several heads turned toward him. A tall reptilian cadet named Vaughn narrowed his gold eyes. "Human, are you defective? That world has acid rain, bone-crushing gravity pockets, venom swarms, and macro-predators." Ethan shrugged. "Yeah, but look at the forests. Waterfalls, mountains, fresh air. Honestly, this feels less like an exam and more like spring break." The cadets around him stared in disbelief. At the front of the chamber, Commandant Sarek stepped onto the platform, his mechanical leg striking the metal deck with sharp, deliberate clicks. The room snapped to attention. "Cadets," he said, voice cold and amplified, "you have been trained in tactics, biology, field medicine, navigation, and survival. Today, you will prove whether that training means anything." He gestured to the hollow world. "You will be dropped in scattered squads across Virex 9. No rescue. No orbit-to-ground guidance. One emergency beacon per team. Extraction occurs in 7 standard days. Fail to endure, and you fail this academy." The screen changed to footage from the planet's surface. Towering trees, black rivers, lightning storms, and something enormous moving through mist. The room got even quieter. Sarek continued. "Virex 9 does not hate you. Hate implies thought. This world kills because killing is what it is." Ethan raised a hand. The Commandant stared. "What is it, Cadet Cross? Do we get sunscreen?" A few cadets gasped. One actually choked. Sarek just blinked once, long and slow, as if recalculating every decision that had led humanity into space. Then he said, "Board the dropships." Minutes later, Ethan sat strapped into a crash seat as the shuttle tore through violet clouds. Around him, cadets clutched restraints, whispered prayers, or silently panicked as turbulence slammed the hull. A warning siren screamed. "Surface winds unstable," the pilot barked. "Impact zone shifting." Through the side port, Ethan caught a glimpse of the world below, dense jungle cut by cliffs and silver rivers, beautiful in the way a loaded weapon was beautiful. The shuttle hit atmosphere harder. Somewhere behind him, a cadet threw up. Ethan grinned. The rear hatch blew open the second they touched down. Rain hammered the metal ramp. The squad stumbled into a clearing surrounded by enormous ferns and twisted trees. The air was thick, hot, and alive with alien screeches. Then the ground shook. From the tree line burst a 6-legged creature the size of a transport, plated in dark scales, jaws opening wide with a roar that rattled Ethan's ribs. Cadets screamed and scattered instantly. One of them froze. The beast lunged. Ethan moved before he thought. He grabbed the terrified cadet by the harness, yanked them sideways, and both slammed into the mud as the monster's jaws crushed empty ground where they had stood. "Okay," Ethan shouted, rising with wild excitement in his eyes. "Now it feels like spring break." Morning on Virex 9 did not arrive with sunlight. It arrived with screaming. Ethan's eyes snapped open as something shrill tore through the jungle canopy above their makeshift shelter. Around him, exhausted cadets jolted awake in panic. The night had been a nightmare of distant roars, stinging insects, and rain that came in bursts hot enough to fog their visors. Somehow, Ethan had slept just fine. Now the forest was awake, and that was worse. "What was that?" whispered Lyron, the thin blue-skinned navigation cadet Ethan had pulled from the thunder lizard's jaws the day before. "Breakfast alarm," Ethan muttered, pushing himself to his feet. The others stared at him. Their shelter stood beneath the roots of a giant ironwood tree, reinforced with stripped branches, broad waxy leaves, and a drainage trench Ethan had insisted on digging before dark. At the time, half the squad had thought it was excessive. Then the midnight flood came, and they stopped complaining. Now they were cold, hungry, and low on clean water. Vaughn, the reptilian cadet, emerged from the far side of camp with mud drying across his armor plates. "Inventory," he snapped. 2 med kits. 1 damaged beacon. Rations for perhaps 1 day if split properly. A small insectoid cadet clicked nervously. "Water reserves are worse. The stream nearby is contaminated. My scanner detected mineral toxins." Ethan crouched near the packs and looked toward the trees. "Then we don't drink from the stream." Vaughn folded his arms. "Brilliant. Shall we survive on confidence, human?" "No," Ethan said. "On condensation, filtered runoff, and anything growing uphill from the red moss line." That silenced the group. Lyron blinked. "You know how to find that?" Ethan gave her a crooked smile. "Back home we call this the fun part." Within an hour he had the squad moving. He showed them how to hang thermal sheets to catch evaporated moisture, how to scrape dew from broad leaves before the sunless heat burned it away, and how to test berries by stages instead of swallowing them and hoping for the best. He marked safe fungus with charcoal, avoided bright vines that secreted skin-blistering resin, and taught them to watch the birds, because anything the local scavengers wouldn't touch was probably trying to kill them. For the first time since landing, the cadets had structure. For the first time, they followed the human. Not everyone liked that. By midday, Vaughn had had enough. "We are cadets of the Galactic War Academy," he growled. "Not hatchlings on a nature walk. We need high ground, weapons, and a route to extraction. Not leaf tricks and berry lessons." Ethan kept weaving cord from shredded plant fiber. "Cool. Do all that after you stop dying of dehydration." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "I will not take orders from someone treating this Deathworld like a recreational outing." Ethan looked up. "Then don't." The reptilian cadet stiffened. "What?" "Take your team," Ethan said. "Find high ground. Build weapons. Be heroic. But this planet doesn't care how proud you are." A long silence followed. Then Vaughn barked to 3 others, and they left. Lyron watched them disappear into the undergrowth. "That was a mistake." "Yep," Ethan said. The attack came less than an hour later. The jungle floor ahead suddenly collapsed in a spray of dirt and roots. From beneath it burst a pack of pale, eyeless creatures with hooked limbs and mouths that opened sideways. Burrow hunters. Fast. Coordinated. Vaughn's group barely had time to shout before one cadet was dragged to the ground. Lyron screamed, "They're surrounded." Ethan was already running. He snatched a burning branch from the cook fire, grabbed a sharpened stake in the other hand, and charged straight into the chaos. One beast lunged. He jammed the flame into its face and drove the stake into the softer tissue beneath its jaw. Another came from the side. Ethan ducked, slammed a rock into its fallen joint, then kicked Vaughn's dropped blade across the mud. "Use the terrain," he shouted. "They surface under pressure points." The cadets didn't understand until Ethan stamped twice on a patch of loose ground and leapt aside. A burrow hunter exploded upward exactly where he'd been standing, and straight into Vaughn's blade. Within seconds, the pack retreated beneath the earth, shrieking into the dark. The clearing fell silent except for ragged breathing. Vaughn stood frozen, chest heaving, staring at the blood on his weapon. Ethan tossed aside the broken stake and offered a hand to the fallen cadet. "Told you," he said. "Spring break bites back." By the third day, Virex 9 had stopped feeling like a planet and started feeling like a trap. The jungle pressed in from every side, thick with damp heat and constant noise. The cadets had learned to fear silence most of all. Silence meant something nearby was listening. Their camp had improved, if only barely. Under Ethan's direction they had reinforced the shelter, woven snare lines, sharpened stakes, and built elevated racks to keep supplies off the ground. No one questioned his methods anymore. Not after the burrow hunters. Not after the acid rainstorm he'd predicted from the smell of the air 10 minutes before it hit. But survival was still slipping through their fingers. The emergency beacon sat in the middle of camp, its casing cracked, its signal light blinking weakly. Lyran crouched beside it, her long blue fingers moving carefully through exposed wiring. "I've rerouted the power cell twice," she said. "It should have reached orbit by now." "Should have," Vaughn muttered, scanning the dark trees beyond the perimeter. Unless Command never intended to answer. No one liked how possible that sounded. Ethan knelt beside the beacon, studying the mud beneath it rather than the device itself. Maybe they did answer. Lyran looked up. What? He pointed toward a set of deep grooves in the earth just outside camp. "Something passed through here last night. Big enough to bend roots without breaking stride." Vaughn's scales tightened. "Another thunder lizard?" Ethan shook his head. "No. Too deliberate." It circled the camp, checked the beacon, then left. A chill passed through the group. "You're saying it knows what technology is?" one cadet whispered. Before Ethan could answer, a roar split the jungle. Not an animal cry. An explosion. The cadets rushed toward the sound and reached a rocky clearing just in time to see smoke rising from the wreckage of a supply pod. Twisted metal lay scattered across broken ferns, still hissing with heat. The Academy had sent them something. Food, power, maybe extraction coordinates. And something had destroyed it before they got there. Ethan moved through the debris with grim focus. He ignored the ration packs torn open in the mud and crouched at the edge of the impact zone. There, stamped into the blackened earth, was a massive three-clawed print. Deep, heavy, fresh. Lyran stared at it. "That's impossible." "No," Ethan said quietly. "Just bad." He stepped farther into the clearing and found the pod's outer shell peeled back like fruit skin. Not smashed. Opened. Nearby, fragments of scorched drone casing were scattered in a rough line leading into the jungle. Vaughn swallowed. It attacked the pod after it landed? Ethan looked toward the trees. No. It attacked it while it was descending. The cadets went still. That meant it had seen the pod in the sky. Timed the strike. Known where to hit. "It's learning," Lyran said, voice thin with fear. Ethan stood, face hardening. "Then we stop acting like prey." Back at camp, he called every cadet into a tight circle. Rivalries vanished in the shadow of the wreckage. Even Vaughn listened without interruption. "This isn't just a survival exam anymore," Ethan said. "Something on this planet is targeting our tech, tracking our movement, and testing our defenses. If we split up, it picks us off. If we panic, it wins. One cadet asked the question none of them wanted to say aloud. What do we do? Ethan picked up a sharpened stake and drove it into the dirt between them. We build a fortress, he said. And when it comes back tonight, we make it regret it. For the first time since landing, no one looked at the human like he was crazy. Now they looked at him like he was their commander. By nightfall, the cadets' camp no longer looked like a desperate shelter. It looked like a challenge. Under Ethan's direction, they had transformed the muddy clearing into a layered defensive ring. Sharpened stakes lined the outer perimeter. Snare vines were hidden beneath leaf litter. Salvaged metal from the destroyed supply pod had been hammered into crude noise traps and reflective panels. The elevated shelter platforms were reinforced with stripped ironwood branches, and a narrow funnel corridor led into the center of camp, an obvious path for anything large enough to think brute force would work. Vaughn stood beside the final barricade, breathing hard. You planned all this in a few hours? Ethan tied off the last cord and stepped back to inspect the trapline. Not all of it. Some of it I learned from camping. Some from old human war history. He gave a thin smile. And some from horror movies. Lyron stared at him. What is a horror movie? Honestly, Ethan said, checking a spear point. Exactly what tonight is going to feel like. The jungle darkened quickly. On Virex 9, sunset was less a fading of light and more a swallowing of it. Mist rolled low between the trees. The shrieking insects went quiet. Then the bigger noises faded too. Silence. Every cadet froze. Positions, Ethan whispered. They moved at once. Lyron climbed to the left platform with a bundle of signal flares. Vaughn crouched near the funnel corridor with two of the heavier cadets, each armed with scavenged blades lashed to poles. Others waited on the perimeter with stones, sharpened stakes, and containers of caustic sap collected earlier that day. Ethan stood in the center, spear in one hand, a burning branch in the other. Then the motion sensor they had rigged from beacon parts clicked once, twice. From the mist emerged two glowing eyes. The creature stepped into view slowly, like it knew it had already won. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the thunder lizard from their first day. Its body was plated in layered black armor that reflected the firelight like wet stone. 6 limbs carried it with terrifying grace, and its head was narrow, angular, almost deliberate in design. Scars marked one side of its neck. Not random wounds, old battle marks. It had survived many things. It would survive no more. The beast paused at the edge of the clearing, studying the defenses. It's thinking, one cadet breathed. Good, Ethan said quietly. So are we. The monster lunged. The first trapline snapped tight around its front legs, slowing it just enough for Vaughn's team to trigger the reflective panels. Bright light flashed across the clearing. The creature reeled, disoriented, and crashed into the outer stakes. It roared so hard the platforms shook. Now! Ethan shouted. Caustic sap rained from above, hissing across the gaps in its armor. The beast thrashed and tore free, smashing through the barricade in a storm of broken wood. One cadet screamed as the shock wave threw him sideways. Another slipped from the platform. The creature turned toward the fallen cadet. Ethan intercepted it. He sprinted straight across the clearing, firebrand high, and slammed the burning branch into the beast's face. It snapped at him with jaws lined in hooked teeth. Ethan rolled beneath the strike, drove his spear into a softer seam near the forelimb, and yelled, "Left side armor is weaker. Hit the joints." Vaughn charged in without hesitation. So did the others. The cadets moved as one unit now, not scattered students but a team forged by fear and the human who had taught them how to stand inside it. They struck from angles, forced the creature into the funnel corridor, then triggered the final trap. Salvaged pod plating dropped from above and slammed onto the beast's back, pinning it long enough for Ethan to leap onto the wreckage. He raised the broken spear with both hands and drove it deep through the gap in its neck armor. The creature gave one last roar, then collapsed. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Lyron let out a shaky laugh. Vaughn lowered his blade and stared at Ethan like he was seeing humanity clearly for the first time. Mud-covered, bleeding, and grinning like a man who had just won a game, Ethan looked around at the stunned cadets and said, "Okay, now this is starting to feel like spring break." Rescue arrived on the 7th day beneath a sky the color of bruised steel. The cadets heard the dropship long before they saw it, its engines cutting through the storm winds with mechanical certainty. For a moment, nobody in the clearing spoke. They simply stood there, mud-streaked, exhausted, wrapped in scavenged armor plates and stitched survival gear, watching the clouds break overhead. A week earlier, they had landed as students. Now they looked like survivors of a war. The rescue shuttle descended into the shattered valley where Ethan's team had made their final camp. From above, the scene must have looked impossible. Defensive walls built from twisted wreckage, traps strung between ironwood trunks, drying racks of preserved meat, rain collectors, signal mirrors, and at the center of it all, the enormous skull and plated forelimbs of the apex predator they had killed. When the shuttle ramp lowered, Commandant Serek stepped onto the mud in full academy armor, flanked by medics and armed retrieval officers. For the first time since meeting him, Ethan saw the old commander hesitate. Serek's gaze swept across the camp. The cadets were standing in formation, not because anyone had ordered them to, but because they had become something that naturally formed ranks. Vaughn stood at Ethan's right, Lyron at his left. Behind them, every surviving cadet held steady despite visible injuries, fatigue, and the lingering tension of a world that still wanted them dead. Then Ethan lifted a hand in greeting. "Took you long enough," he called. "We were starting to think this place didn't have room service." Several cadets actually laughed. Even one of the retrieval officers let out a shocked breath that might have been a suppressed chuckle. Serek walked forward slowly, stopping just before the remains of the predator. "You killed this," Vaughn answered before Ethan could. "No, Commandant. We survived it." He glanced sideways at the human. "Then Cadet Cross taught us the difference." Serek's eyes narrowed slightly. "Report." What followed stunned the entire rescue team. The cadets described the Thunder Lizard attack on day 1, the poison streams, the burrow hunter ambush, the destruction of the supply pod, the intelligent predator stalking their camp, and the fortress Ethan had organized under pressure. Each account confirmed the same truth. Without the human cadet, most of them would have died before the 3rd night. Lyron spoke of strategy under panic. Vaughn spoke of leadership without rank. Others spoke of things that made the officers visibly uncomfortable. How Ethan had predicted weather by smell, found safe water without scanners, and used the terrain like he had known the planet his whole life. When they finished, silence settled over the valley. Serek looked at Ethan for a long moment. "You treated a Class 3 Deathworld as manageable." Ethan shrugged. "Manageable is a strong word. I'd say it was more aggressively educational." That broke the tension just enough for exhausted smiles to return. Hours later, aboard the orbiting Academy cruiser, medics rushed to triage the cadets, but rumors moved faster than treatment. By the time Ethan stepped into debriefing, every officer on the deck had already heard some version of the story. The human who laughed at the Deathworld. The cadet who turned fear into tactics. The one who fought like the planet itself had raised him. In the official report, The Academy labeled the exercise a survival success under extreme field conditions. But among the cadets, the truth spread in simpler words. Humans were different. Not because they were fearless. Because they could look at a nightmare, learn its rules, and start winning. As Ethan left debriefing, Sarek called after him. "Cadet Cross." Ethan turned. The commandant folded his arms. "Your evaluation is exceptional. Your methods were irregular, reckless, and tactically unapproved." Ethan smiled. "But effective?" Sarek's expression did not change. Disturbingly. Ethan gave a lazy salute and kept walking. "Great. So what's the next exam?" "Somewhere harder, I hope." Behind him, Sarek watched the human disappear down the corridor, while the surviving cadets followed in his wake without even thinking about it. And for the first time, the Academy Command truly understood why the galaxy watched humanity with quiet unease. If this was what a human cadet did on spring break, then a fully trained human army was something no sane civilization should ever invite onto a battlefield.